Today's session is brought to you by Bucket List Rewards, the #1 employee rewards and recognition platform. And it is also brought to you by Onboarding, the leading experience-driven onboarding platform. And what is today's session all about? We're on a mission to help people leaders build the best cultures possible. And I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again because it's worth repeating. But I think my favorite types of webinars to attend are those where I get somewhere between 1 to 3 takeaways. And I believe Laura Lee has some awesome takeaways, a lot more than 3. But at the end, as always, I'm going to be asking you, what was your favorite piece of knowledge? What was your favorite tactic? And I'm really looking forward to hearing from everybody today. But we'll get you to type that into the chat window at the end. By way of introduction, my name is Jason Lindstrom. I am the CEO over at Bucket List Rewards. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and my current focus is on Bucket List. It's a hyper-growth organization, just an amazing team. But more importantly, with us here today is Laura Lee Gentry. She is the Chief People Officer at Onboarding. And at Onboarding, Laura Lee is responsible for talent acquisition, for onboarding, for total rewards, for talent management, leadership development, internal communications, and employer branding. So certainly a lot of things to be managing. And with Laura Lee's unique combination of business, operational, and human resources experience, she focuses on helping companies to scale rapidly while deepening and enhancing their culture. And prior to Onboarding, Laura Lee was a Chief People Officer at Applied Systems and Senior Vice President of Employee Experience at UKG. She got her BBA in finance at the University of Georgia and her MBA in international finance and strategy at the London Business School, which sounds like an amazing experience and probably a good conversation for another time. And she currently resides in Atlanta, Georgia. So Laura Lee, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Jason, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. And in terms of an agenda, we're going to be talking about the importance, or pardon me, Laura Lee is going to be talking about the importance of employee onboarding. We're going to be talking about how to define what a successful onboarding looks like, the 4 C's of onboarding, and the onboarding maturity levels. And with that, I'm going to start off with one quick poll question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Laura Lee. So that poll question is, do you have a current onboarding process? And give me a second while I go ahead and launch this. So up on screen, you should see a little poll question appear. Do you have a current onboarding process? Great participation, everybody. Answers are rapidly rolling in. I'll give this another 5 seconds for you to fill out. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and let me share the results with everybody. So it looks like around 80% of you have some sort of onboarding process in place. A percentage of you are no, not yet. And then around 20% are currently working on it. I think regardless of where you are in the cycle, this is the perfect place to be. So I'm going to stop sharing. And with that, I'd love to turn it over. And Laura Lee, my first question for you is, how important are the key employee metrics such as retention and engagement to onboarding?
Jason, they are inextricably linked. And there's multiple instances, there's a wealth of research that reinforces that. In fact, if any of you are familiar with the work of Dr. Talia Bauer, she correlated the impact of onboarding on retention and productivity, as well as employee engagement. I'll be sharing some highlights from her research. This particular piece of research outlines 4 keys to onboarding success, also known as the 4 C's of onboarding model. So if you could, so go, Jason.
Yeah, and I was going to ask next up, if you could tell us, what does a successful onboarding process look like? A nice high-level question to get us kicked off.
100%. So what you need for successful onboarding is 4 key things: self-efficacy, role clarity, social integration, and cultural knowledge. When I talk about self-efficacy, this is a candidate or an employee's ability to feel confident that they can perform well in the job. A new employee that feels confident in their ability will be more motivated and eventually more successful than their less confident counterparts. We want our onboarding to really help boost employees' confidence as they navigate their new role and their organization. And then when we talk about role clarity, this is about how well a new employee understands his or her role and the expectations of them in that role. Performance obviously will suffer if expectations are ambiguous. And interestingly, role clarity is among the most consistent predictors of job satisfaction and organizational commitment during onboarding. Social integration is, we want to make sure that new employees feel socially comfortable and accepted. This in particular has been positively linked to their commitment and lowering turnover. And then finally, knowledge of the culture. It's really important that our new employees understand the organization's politics, goals, and values, and that people learn the unique language. These are all really important indicators of good employee adjustment to their new environment. So if we apply that to the 4 C's model, there's a real strong, consistent message here. So the 4 C's, as I mentioned, this concept was originally published by Dr. Bauer from the SHRM Foundation back in 2010. And it concluded that a successful onboarding program needs 2 things. First, you need to choose the right employee. So if you operate with the assumption that your talent acquisition team has got that nailed. Second, you need to cover the 4 C's. This model applies to virtual onboarding just as well. In fact, it's even more important to have a thoughtful structure when you're onboarding virtually, because the research has shown that both new hires virtually and in person and their onboarding stakeholders need a lot more hand-holding, a lot more guidance, and a lot more structure to make virtual onboarding fantastic. So clarification, very consistent. This is how clearly a new hire's job requirements and responsibilities are communicated. This could also include norms for accomplishing tasks and how things are described both internally and externally, like acronyms. Nailing the clarification piece means that the sooner new employees understand their jobs, the sooner they'll become more productive. And at Onboarder, we suggest that you don't just clearly articulate your expectations of your new hire to that new hire, but that you also clarify and communicate this with other key stakeholders and team members to avoid role conflict. Some examples of doing this C might include training, roundtable discussions, meeting with key insiders, on-the-job learning supported by line management, individual mentoring and HR support, field and product experience such as on-site visits and shadowing programs. So the second one, compliance, probably the one that we get the least excited about, but it's necessary, right? These are on-the-job basics, tax forms, employment paperwork, I-9s, badges, email accounts, IT equipment, all the things that people need to execute in a given job. A number of ways you could do this. You could drip feed the compliance content to your new hire during their pre-boarding, so it's all out of the way before day 1. You could gamify it. Just remember that compliance work doesn't have to be fun, but it should be efficient, and that itself delivers a good experience. Culture really refers, again, to the org's politics, goals, values, and its unique language. The more quickly and accurately new employees can interpret and understand the overall culture and the subcultures within an organization, the better their chances for long-term success. And then finally, connection. Connection refers to the key interpersonal relationships, support systems, and networks that new employees need to establish upon entering a new organization. This can include things like setting up meet and greets with your new hire and key stakeholders or key leaders. You could also introduce a mentorship or buddy program for new hires, have team building events, lunches, etc. Orgs that can effectively coordinate these 4 aspects of onboarding really enjoy positive new hire outcomes, consistently higher job satisfaction, higher productivity, and lower turnover. So they're powerful. So if you think about level 1 or kind of traditional or passive onboarding, at a minimum, you'll do some compliance paperwork because it's legally mandated by your government. And you signed a job offer that contains your job roles and responsibilities. So you've got the clarification piece for the most part. But as you start to move up the food chain to level 2 and level 3, more proactive onboarding, businesses that have incorporated these sort of activities, they touch on both the culture and the connection pieces. They bring those into their onboarding programs. And research has found the high impact on core business metrics, such as consistently higher job sat, higher productivity, lower turnover, happens when companies successfully deliver their onboarding program that touches on all 4 C's. But so if you could, yeah, thank you. But the more researchers dug into this topic, the more the findings supported the fact that kind of a big revelation amongst the 4 C's, there's actually one key C. And this is the one that has the biggest impact on those business metrics by far, and that was connection. And this is what the best employers came to realize. Connection has to be the core component of world-class onboarding, right? This is about people connecting with people. But here at Onboarder, we couldn't help but wonder, like, where does employee experience fall into all this? How can businesses make onboarding a wow experience that your new hire goes home after day 1, full of excitement, telling their friends and family about how incredible their first day at work was? What does that take? And that's really where we landed on, if you move to the next slide for me, Jason. Experience-driven onboarding. So one more click for me. There we go. Thank you. This is the way businesses onboard. This is the newest, most refreshing way that businesses are onboarding. Experience is what ties all 4 of these C's together. Think of experience as the delivery mechanism. Experiences are what bring people together and what sparks a human connection. So if you think about your own company, so I think we had roughly 80% that said they had some onboarding process in place. Take a minute here and reflect. Think about where you think your organization falls on this maturity model. One thing I want to note is that pretty much all organizations start at level 1, including Onboarder's customers when they first start working with us. But great onboarding requires capturing feedback from your new hires and the other stakeholders and refining that journey, iterating in an ongoing basis. We always tell our customers to pursue progress, not perfection. So I think we're going to leave this slide up there to help you. But our poll question is, Jason?
Yeah, let me go ahead and launch that. Thank you. Wonderful. So you should see up on screen, in fact, 2 poll questions. The first being, where do you think your organization falls on the onboarding maturity matrix? So go ahead and fill that out. And question 2, which area of the 4 C's do you feel you need to focus on? Connection, clarity, compliance, or clarification? I can see all the answers pouring in. It looks like a real-time heartbeat almost. Oh, and so users are starting to slow down a little bit. I'll give it another 2 or 3 seconds, and then I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. I'm going to end the poll. Let me share the results with everybody. So how do we do? For question, well, do you want me to speak to this, Laura Lee, or do you want to
go for it?
Yeah,
go for it, Jason.
Yeah, so for question, for the first part, where do you think your organization falls on the onboarding maturity matrix? It looks like a good majority of you, a little under 40%, feel you're high potential or proactive, with only 11% being at the experience-driven level. And then for the second question, which area of the 4 C's do you feel you need to focus on? It looks like connection, and this is exactly what you're just saying, Laura Lee. Looks like connection, 64% is where people feel like they could focus the most. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing there and turn it back over to Laura Lee. So how do you apply the 4 C's of onboarding? If you could walk us through that.
Yeah, I think it's great to speak in, about very high altitude ideas, but I think, I really want people to come out of this session understanding some very practical ways to make this happen. So now that you think about, where onboarding is at your organization and what you're seeking to augment it, I'm going to share one additional piece of research, and then we're going to talk about some very kind of tactical how-to stuff. But a woman by the name of Kate Pavlina, who's currently an HR business partner at Amazon. And we can go to the next slide, Jason. She spent 2 years never mind. She spent 2 years researching how some of the top tech companies in Silicon Valley virtually onboard their new hires. And she published this fantastic piece of research back in August of 2020. What she learned from her research was really interesting. And we'll start at what companies are currently doing when it comes to virtual onboarding. Median length of onboarding programs was about 3.5 weeks. 100% of the participants participated in pre-boarding activities, including communicating with HR, their director or manager, and some of their teammates. 70% also completed new hire paperwork early on in the process. 100% of participants attended a formal orientation and participated in topical, online learning. And every participant reported that building connections was a focus. So, okay, now we could go.
Wonderful. And then I guess that might lead to the question, what do new hires want, need in the virtual onboarding settings?
Yeah, so this was one of the biggest kind of ahas for us. The needs of new hires are not all that different when they're onboarded virtually versus important. But although their needs are the same, the approach has to be drastically different. Instead of trying to translate the on-site experience, try curating a distinct, intentional virtual experience that's aligned with your organization's culture. I'll give you an example. A lot of traditional new hire orientations involve bringing however many of your new hires into one room and having a parade of executives come in and talk about what they do, what their functions do, how that connects and how that relates. Well, would you really chain a new hire to a chair and make them go through 8 hours of Zoom meetings of executive after executive after executive? That would be so painful and so disengaging. So just put yourself in their shoes and think about the experience from a virtual point of view and adapt it to that reality. So, but let's talk about some logistics, some key levers that I think can help these new hire experiences be successful. So logistics matter, right? All the way through the new hire onboarding experience. It's sort of like making sure your computer's there on day one. It seems dull, but if the trains aren't running on time, you are communicating to your new hires that you don't have the organizational skills or the prioritization to make their day one experience important. So logistics matter. Managers. The hiring manager can make or break the new hire onboarding experience. So how can you set them up for success? Forums for connection. You need to create ways for your new hires to connect with other people in the company, both at the individual and at the community or team or function level. And then empathy and understanding. New hires really want their employers to be empathetic towards them in both action and words, right? I care that you're here. I am grateful that you put your trust in me. You're an amazing talent, and I'm so excited about what you're going to make happen here at this company. So those are really, really important. So let's talk about how to make that happen. So seamless logistics. I'm not going to read through all of these, and we'll be sending out these slides post-webinar, but these are some really solid tactical ideas to help you pull on the onboarding levers I just spoke about. When it comes to logistics, the headline here is you want to make sure new hires have access to the tech and tools they need to do their job. They need ongoing support and resources, and you want to make sure it's a smooth, efficient process. Then if we talk about great managers, as I said before, your manager is going to make or break your new hires experience. And even in the lack of a lot of tools and fancy onboarding experiences, the human touch from a great hiring manager can overcome a lot of other gaps. So the managers are key to onboarding success. You want to make sure that everyone gets a consistent yet personalized onboarding experience. And you want to make sure you've involved the new hire's entire team in that journey. Building connections. Look, the extra effort is really worth it. You know how important connection is, and this is particularly challenging to foster in virtual settings. First, you have to be very intentional and proactive when it comes to creating connections during virtual onboarding. Schedule one-on-ones with key stakeholders on behalf of your new hire. Create some fun social events and employee resource groups, and openly share information about the company and its norms. And then empathy, and making sure that people feel accepted as their authentic selves and understood. This is the last lever for successful virtual onboarding. Set expectations and let the new hire know what's coming and why. Keep the experience intentional and cohesive. How does onboarding transition from candidate to new hire to veteran? And finally, remember that onboarding is also an emotional experience. These are human beings. Make sure their manager, their team, and the entire people department is reminding the new hire that they are valued and cared for, that you're really, truly grateful to have them there at your company.
So next, I love to talk about how do you measure the impact and ROI of onboarding?
Yeah, this is critical, Jason. This is an investment in your people. So ROI is important, right? Onboarding, on the onboarding ROI, we already know that successful onboarding has a positive impact on business metrics like engagement, retention, and turnover. But some things that you could think about measuring could include retention rates, particularly within the new hires' first year. Yeah. Direct feedback from the new hires. You can easily do this via surveys and forms to capture the feedback. Engagement scores, make sure to measure engagement at various stages of the onboarding journey as well. Leave of absences. Those rates can often be a warning signal or a red flag for disengagement. And of course, manager sat. How happy are the hiring managers with their new hire? That's a great measure also for your talent acquisition teams.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for walking us through that. And I know, Laura Lee, you're able to cover a ton of information in a relatively short period of time, which is awesome. Yeah. And what I was going to say in a moment is we're going to be opening it up for questions. And what I'd encourage everybody to do is I can already see a couple of questions that have been added to the QA panel. But if you wanted to go ahead and add your questions to the Q&A, Laura Lee is a wealth of information. Before we get to questions, however, I'm always really curious to learn, and I'm sure Laura Lee as well. What did you learn about today? What were your takeaways? And for example, Laura Lee covered a ton of tools, tips, and tactics. But for example, we shared a process for successful onboarding. Oh, and I'd love for you, the attendees, to share what your favorite takeaway was inside of the chat window. So go ahead and just type whatever that was, whether that was a snippet or a big chunk of content. But we shared a process for successful onboarding. We walked through the 4 C's of onboarding and also the onboarding maturity levels. And then additionally, Laura Lee walked through a whole bunch of really tactical tips on things you could do today. And I can see a ton of answers already floating in here. So it looks like this is great. So Jen, my takeaway, the virtual onboarding should be much more intentional. Absolutely. Amber, nice to know we're doing some things well. Crystal said she loved the 4 C's. Vanessa loved the 4 C's, the ROI of the program. Daniela said pursue progress, not perfection. Marcella, reaffirm we're on the right track with our onboarding process. It sounds like somebody wants to pivot. Sounds like somebody wants to upgrade what the current. Oh, this is great. There's a ton of good takeaways. Awesome, everybody. Cool. So thank you for clearly what was some great content there, Laura Lee.
My pleasure.
And from here, we're going to switch to the question and answer side of things. I have some questions myself, and also, as I said, I saw some questions come rolling in. So the first question, this is from Vanessa. Do you have a list of the 4 C's of onboarding that you can share? And sidebar, we're recording this presentation. We'll share that with everybody. But any additional comments from your side, Laura Lee?
No, I think it's important to hold all 4 of those in your mind, right? The compliance, I think, is kind of the starting point for most people. But the clarification, I think, often needs more work than we realize. We think that just because someone went through a recruiting process, that they're really clear on their role and how it aligns and connects with other parts of the organization. But really the compliance, the clarification, the culture, and the connection. And, they say culture eats strategy for lunch, right? And I think a lot of companies know they have a culture. It's kind of something that they can sense and feel. But I think it's really important to be very clear about articulating your culture, and for people leaders like ourselves to also be very clear about what behaviors are expected, particularly in leaders of teams, that reinforces that culture every day. Because if you don't define, articulate, and reinforce culture, and you make sure it's consistently flowing through every element of the employee experience, you'll not only send, false signals that can be very disengaging, but culture will define itself if you don't get out in front of it. And I know we've all seen that happen. But I think for me, it's about holding those four together and really thinking about how the employee experience flows from that. Is kind of like, if they're at the core of the wheel, what's the experience in the acquisition process, in the onboarding process, in the functional training process, in the leadership development process, in the promotion process, that whole kind of journey within the company.
Laura Lee, thank you. Excellent answer. And we've had a ton of questions flow in here, so I'll start making my way through those. The next question is from Darren, and he said or asked, for a fully or mostly remote onboarding experience, how much do you recommend scheduling meetings versus self-guided learning, AKA time alone?
Yeah, so I don't know that I have a 50-50 answer for you, but I do think I'm onboarding 4 people over this month. And, I identified the key stakeholders, and I actually took a page from one of our customers' book, who kind of clusters the weeks almost thematically. So week 1 for me was a blend of about 50 to 60% one-on-one meetings with their teammates and their, kind of their functional sphere of people. And then peppered in, I like micro learning, particularly for virtual onboarding experience. And so giving them the chance to decide when they do that, as opposed to cramming that into their schedule. We talk about that in terms of synchronous and asynchronous experiences. So I think leaving them some time for controlled volunteer, this is when I'm going to do this learning because I know this is when it's a good time for me intellectually, or a good time for my household, is a really smart idea. I also factor in time for absorption and reflection, so that it's not a fire hose experience.
Yeah, you have to be very wary of the information overload for sure.
100%.
Awesome. I'm going to jump into the next question from Lindsay. And Lindsay had asked, we have a lot of field staff. How do we make sure they understand our culture if they never make it into the office? And then she added, I'm thinking, should we do things like welcome videos with myself, the recruitment manager, etc.?
Yeah, I like welcome videos as well, particularly if you can get your CEO to talk about the culture and his vision for how that culture comes to life and his expectations for people, again, from a behavioral standpoint. And you can reinforce those with your competency models as well. So, so that they are, and with your leadership development planning as well, so that if they're out in the field, they still have a leader and a manager that they're interacting with, or a team that they're interacting with all the time. And so you want those behaviors to be reinforcing that culture. We also try to balance respecting people's individual priorities and the need for, collegial connection. So, even at the height of, even once COVID, we've kind of had a height of COVID and a dip of COVID and a height of COVID. So throughout that, we never said our people have to be in the office. If you don't feel safe, you work from home, you're a trusted professional, it's all good. But we try to create compelling events that make people want to come into the office. And, I think that's a much more positive model to take. For example, my CEO is coming in from Australia to our Austin global headquarters for 4 or 5 weeks. And his second week that he's here, we're holding a US Business Summit. It's going to focus on the performance of this region. And then we're all going to go off and do something fun in the afternoon as a team building event. And then we're probably going to go consume some adult beverages and some fun food somewhere out in the Austin area. Nobody's going to want to miss that. I hired someone yesterday who rescheduled a vacation so that she can start a week earlier so she can attend that. So, I think drawing people in a very constructive way and creating that connective tissue and giving your leaders permission to be creative and personalized about how they do that with their teams, I think is also a good idea.
That sounds that sounds awesome. And as we were saying before this call, hearing about that, I'm like, it makes me want to come and join you guys. I'm not even a part of Enboard. That's such a good time. Um, Excellent. And moving on to the next question, which is from Liza. And Liza asks for suggestions for a smooth transition from a company level onboarding to a team specific onboarding. And how can we integrate the 4Cs both at the company level and at the team level?
Yeah, so some of the 4Cs kind of naturally operate at the company level, like compliance, right? You gotta check those boxes for anybody, regardless of where they are. I think of it, I don't know if everybody has read like Simon Sinek's Start With Why, but he talks about, nested whys, which are sort of like the culture statement for a company. And then there might be subcultures. So you might have something that fits within that, like a nested why for the engineering organization or the people team. And so I think about connection happening really at the local team level. Like, again, if I use my earlier example, the CEO might be the beacon or the North Star for the culture, but you've got to bring that to life at the team level and at the functional level. So I think of them more as like less about a transition and more like two interlocking processes that need to flow together. So I would strongly encourage teams to architecture pieces that speak just to their teams and to their leaders, and building those teams, because connection happens at the local level, right?
100% from my experience, anyways. Absolutely, yeah. And the next question here is from Darren, and he asks, what tools do you use as an employee checklist and guide for them, the employee, to know what to do next?
There's kind of two answers to that. One, so the way Onboarding works, and of course we use our own product, is we have a template of ideal things that would happen as part of the onboarding or the learning or whatever the experiences that you're mapping through our platform. And it's almost like it's a very intuitive user interface, and you can almost like drag things both above the line and below the line that need to happen in terms of your desired architecture for that experience, whatever that experience is. I will say, for my own personal best practice, I actually craft personally the first 3 weeks of their onboarding plan so that I can be very thoughtful. Remember, I talked about themes, like week 1 is all about getting to know your team, getting to know me, getting to know like our objectives and our mission for the year, and my vision for how they're going to plug into that, so that we can start to have dialogue, right? Because they're just launching their discovery, and they're going to need to come back to me and say, okay, you bare bones sketched out what my mission is for the next 18 months, but now that I'm more informed, let's flesh that out. And that's a really constructive, robust dialogue. And then I might shift to handcrafting. Okay, week 2, you're going to spend time with the executive team, and you're going to understand the pain points in the organization, why I hired you, the gaps in the business that you are specifically going to address. And then week 3 might be more about like more strategic work, company-wide work in terms of performance, mission, strategy, as an example.
Awesome. Thank you again, Laura Lee. And also to that answer, and this whole presentation, you've done an awesome job of providing good high-level strategic advice. But obviously, Laura, just to reiterate, Onboarding, the company Laura Lee works with, is an awesome product. And in a few moments, we're going to give everybody a chance. If you want to learn more, and I think you really should, there's going to be a chance to request to learn more information. So in a handful of minutes when we're done the questions, we'll give everybody a chance to learn more about Onboarding. And I'd certainly encourage everybody who's not using them to do so, because that platform and tool could certainly streamline and help you implement a lot of the things being recommended today.
Right. And Jason, I know you share, we both have incredible passion for what we do and why we do it. Yeah. And I'm actually at Onboarding, not because of the product, but because of what the product represents in terms of our belief that humans need to be at the center of all things. And so
100%. Yeah, absolutely. So, another question here. Oh, this is a good one. A bit of a tactical question from Darren, and thank you, Darren. Do you have a suggestion for how much onboarding versus work people need to do sort of each week or month? For example, week 1, 0% work, 100% learning. Is there any thoughts around balance on that?
That it's a good question to ask. And I don't think there's a formulaic answer. I would definitely agree with the week 1 is all learning and onboarding, right? Unless you've hired like a machinist who knows how to do their job on day 1, few people know how to do their job on day 1 or have the context in terms of how to do it. I think that, but you also can't let someone languish out there in this kind of netherworld of onboarding for too long. And so the answer to that question is going to depend on the company, the role. But what I would encourage is that your people team thoughtfully thinks about that. And again, iterates to refine it, possibly by function. So again, for me and the people team, 0% week 1, actually close to 0% week 2. Maybe it's starting to come in at like 25, 75. As an example, I have a internal communications and employer branding woman starting next Monday. Now, she's already learned all about the Onboarder brand. She's already, because she's so enthusiastic, she's already taken stock of our social media presence and how we're telling our story today. She's going to, as soon as she gets a little more context from all of her peers in like talent acquisition, marketing, et cetera, she's going to be ready and chomping at the bit to start getting stuff out. So she's probably going to ramp from 25 to 50 to whatever like her steady state going forward is, because right, onboarding doesn't end either at 3 or 4 weeks. There's going to be some, 5 to 10% that's going to be perennial, because then it shifts into employee engagement.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you. And so I've run through a lot of the questions in the QA window. I'm going to jump over to the chat here. And there's some great questions here as well. So from Irma, I'm working on a new hire program emphasizing employee connection. I would love to hear how companies are organizing those first touches from peers. Supervisors we do pretty well with, but what do you recommend for peers? Laura Lee, thoughts on that?
I like to do a fun team event. So as an example, with my woman that's starting next Monday, because of the nature of our we're a global company. So she's actually starting her day at 9:30 a.m. with a US EMEA welcome kickoff fun meeting. And then she's ending her day with her APAC India teammates, a welcome fun kickoff event. So I think, and then she'll have one-on-ones with each of those people to go deeper into their roles. But I think just people coming in to feel that energy of the team together, that's really infectious. And, I like to, again, back to, it might have been Darren's question when he was talking about like, how do you mix the learning versus work throughout, the first couple of weeks? I think you also need to be very thoughtful about mixing the data consumption versus the fun factor. And to keep, think about the first couple of weeks and how am I keeping this person's energy and enthusiasm high?
Excellent. Thank you.
Can I add one thing, Jason, that just also for the people leaders on this call, be very cognizant if you have a hiring manager that's doing this for the first time. And if you have a hiring manager that's onboarding someone for the first time, you need to come in. It's like a parent with a kid they're teaching to drive, right? You need to be in the front passenger seat with them and making sure that everything happens. It's a great chance for them to learn. And you really you can't entrust that to them if you've never done it before. I'm not saying they're idiots. I'm just saying, give them like more support than you think that they would need.
I love it. I think for anything, my 2 cents in my experience, anything important like an employee onboarding, you always want to inspect what you expect. And so, but I loved your metaphor better. Like if you're teaching your teenager how to drive, like you're not like day one, here's the keys, go for it, right? So
right, exactly. And take the Porsche while you're at it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, here's the fancy car. Awesome. The next question is from Steven. In a quickly growing startup that can often be understaffed and where resources are being moved on a regular basis, it can make things confusing and sometimes difficult. What can we do to combat that? It's a big
So, it is. So, we're kind of in Borders, we're a 5-year-old company. So, but we're kind of moving from that startup to scale up stage. So I get this. I was hired last October, first ever chief people officer, and our quote unquote people team was 3 recruiters. So I get the lack of resources. For us, it was a very natural extension for the recruiters to handle onboarding as well, because they already had that relationship with the candidate. They made good instinctual decisions, but they didn't have anything close to kind of the rigorous process that I talked about today. So we've put that in place. We also leverage people like our office managers because they're present on site. And even if your employee is remote, there's probably a natural hub for them to be associated with, right? So they're people, and actually the office managers liked it because it was actually fun, kind of broke up the monotony of their roles. So I think in a startup, think about people who kind of have an inherent natural affinity for doing that work, and for which this would be ideally a way to give them a career growth and development experience as well. And I bet you'll come up with some additional resources to help you do this. I look for things like this that I'm super passionate about as well. I do it myself, right? If it has to be done and there's not an obvious person, like until you have a chance to grow and build out more, put your energy where you're going to have the most impact on your people, and this is definitely one of them.
Excellent. And this is a bit of an extension to that last question, and 2 people actually asked it. Keisha and Lindsay were interested about this, but that question is, any tips on getting the manager buy-in and understanding of the importance of their role in onboarding?
Yes, and there's actually a really good comment in here that's very similar from Tony Moretto. A new supervisor needs to be onboarded to be a great supervisor as well. 100%. So if I go back to when I was talking about culture and I was talking about your leadership competency model, or I like to call them values in action, right? Because you take your values and you translate them into the behaviors that are expected. You can use those as a great way to teach your hiring managers how to be great onboarding and hiring managers. My pleasure, Jenny. And I think you have to do that with behaviors, right? I shared a lot of checklists today because I think, let's nail that stuff so that we can move on to the more value added stuff. And that's really where that connection, the behaviors of the hiring manager come into play. And, but, we have to assume that our managers or supervisors don't know how to do this, right? They're not malicious. They just have never been taught. So teach them, support them, give them the chance to get comfortable with these behaviors in, different training forums or different experiences that help them understand it. And then also hold them accountable, right? So if you get feedback from a new hire that their supervisor didn't do all the things, again, it doesn't have to be HR's here to put their thumb on you and get you in trouble, but it's a great opportunity for your people team to go back to that leader and say, this was the feedback. How can we help you be better?
That's awesome. At one tiny thought or experience that we recently did, we because we're an employee experience company as well, we one of our quarterly OKRs or goals was to we surveyed every single new hire coming through the onboarding program, and the goal is to have nothing less than a 9 or 10 out of 10. And all the results were shared publicly with the leadership team, so all the sub managers knew that this is going to be reported on and everything. Anyways, it created some crystal clear accountability. And I tell you, the leadership team and the managers became very focused on providing a top-notch onboarding experience. So.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier something very similar to what gets measured gets done. And I love that. Yeah, we were actually so bold at one of my prior companies. We had a 4 or 5 question survey of new hires about their onboarding experience. And the last question was, is this my best onboarding experience I've ever had in my career? And our goal was better than 95% yes. And it was audacious, but that was the standard we wanted to set for ourselves. And we'll probably do something similar here.
That's great. I love how much you're raising the bar there. And I realize we're kind of coming up on time here, so this will be the last question, and then we'll switch to wrap up and give everybody a chance to learn more about Onboarder and bucket list. So this one's from Karen. She feels that we're on the right track, but need to fix and work on some things. How have you or other companies successfully had IT help set new talent up with their equipment and systems and access on time? And can you elaborate on what should be done pre-boarding that has helped?
So yes, every time I have embarked on either creating onboarding or upgrading onboarding, IT is my best friend, right? Because that has to happen, right? I've done it manually in companies where I didn't have, the back office systems to prompt and automate ordering and things like that. And I've done it in Border, obviously, when I talked about that above the line and below the line kind of drag and drop workflow. You would drag in like day one, IT equipment has appeared. Okay, 2 weeks prior to that, below the line is a ping to IT to order the equipment, or for the hiring manager to find out what equipment is needed. And then that automatically goes into a form that they've been prompted with, and that automatically goes to IT. So the order goes in well in advance, and we know that they'll get it on time. So you can do that manually, or you can leverage a system. But yes, IT is mission critical. But I will tell you again, I know we've got companies of different sizes. Human touch can also overcome anything that systems don't provide. So I am the lone DOS user in a company full of Mac users. And so when my sweet CEO was onboarding me, he said, "What kind of laptop would you like to have?" And I said, I'm a DOS gal. I need, but Dell, IBM, whatever's easiest for you to order. I'm not picky. So he goes to our procurement company, and he comes back to me kind of like, he's like, "My procurement company only can acquire Macs. So if you will identify the PC that you'd like to have, I will go and order it for you and have it shipped to you." And I was like, "Brett, you're lovely, but time out. I do not need my seat. If I go to the store to get the serial number for what I want, I'll just buy the damn computer and send you the expense." And he was like, you wouldn't mind doing that? I was like, "No, my CEO does not need to be ordering my equipment." So, but again, I took care of it, but I had nothing. I was delighted to do it. Right. So anyway, sorry, quick story.
No, I love the stories. And I think that just goes to speak to the culture at Onboarder. You guys are walking the talk. If a CEO is willing to take the time to deeply care about and support a team member that way, that speaks volumes about your organization. And speaking of which, a bunch more positive comments have been flowing through. Teresa said, "This was great. Thank you so much." Somebody else said, "Laura Lee, are you hiring Laura Lee? I love Austin, so you're getting candidates here. So helpful. Thank you both so much for sharing all the insights and ideas." So on and on. And thank you also for the attendees. I can see there's a bunch of great suggestions, thoughts, and comments. So thank you for sharing those as we've gone through the content today. For next steps, I'm going to go back and give everybody a chance to learn a little bit more about bucket list and, of course, Onboarder as well. And then we have the SHRM and HRCI credits. So let's do that now. So if you're interested in learning more about bucket list rewards and recognition, we provide a highly personalized rewards and recognition experience, and we do an awesome job to support the onboarding process, everything from welcome awards to rewarding key milestones to helping you bring your values alive. Let me just pop up a question poll. So, too many screens going on here. So yeah, do you want to learn more about bucket list rewards? I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll, and I'll give that everybody a second or two to fill this out. You should see that up on screen. But yeah, if you want to help bring your core values alive, your mission and vision alive, we're awesome at that. Or even performance rewards. If you want to reward things like innovation, customer service, if you want to help lowering churn, all that good stuff, we'd be happy to walk you through the platform and show you how it could work for your company. I'm going to go ahead and end this poll, and we'll open it up to Onboarder. And so would you like to learn more about Onboarder? I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. You should see that up on screen. Yeah, if you're looking for help in automating and streamlining your onboarding process, I'd highly recommend you chat with the folks over at Onboarder. Laura Lee, I don't know if you want to speak to this slide or.
Yeah, so just quickly, we're so grateful for all of you that attended today. So as a thank you, Onboarder will be sending out some bonus content to everyone who joined the webinar, including a virtual onboarding toolkit, a checklist, and a best practice hybrid onboarding template. So hopefully that'll be helpful to you all. This has been an incredible attendee group. So they're so engaged. I hope they put this to use.